What We Cannot See Pioneers Intended Ending. Part 2. After Dr. York said this, he stepped back, and Stanley Gutenoa went and took his place. He then began speaking in his peculiar nasally voice, but with all of the impenetrable charisma he always commanded. Dr. York has presented you all with some information on what we are referring to now as the Byasein, but we are not going to stand idle while both the Bionicle and Minifig races cut down every day. Many of you have noticed that we have been recruiting and training new citizen soldiers, and have been lining them up along with our regular armed forces. It is for a reason. Friends, you have lived in fear of these monsters for an unacceptably long time. We have been competing far too much with the Bionicles, and our quest for empire has made us arrogant. The Minifig Newland Empire has made the executive decision to assemble our military and launch a full-scale campaign against the Byasein. Gutenoa pauses after this, as the crowd gasps. Archimod and his fellow Bionicles aren't quite as shocked by this, but are still slightly surprised. Gutenoa continues. The decision is a large one, but if we are to see our two great peoples to a safe and secure future, we must pool all of our nation's vast resources together and fight the Byasein. Itka has been working on several new military weapons. Our Imperial Army has been outfitted with powerful new blaster rifles, as well as a lighter and stronger mesh armor they wear underneath their uniforms. But these things will not defeat the Byasein. It is intelligence and strategy that will determine our fate. I wish to ask you all a question. When you entered the New Land, did you notice anything strange? What are these structures that surround us? Why do they have such odd shapes to them? Well, we still don't quite know, but it's a safe bet that the driving mind behind these monster attacks, the Byasein, makes its putrid nest inside one of these massive structures. This is a little side note to the YouTube watchers. When Gutenoa actually talks about these strange structures, he's indicating the house itself, because they're outside, and they're walking around the house. They don't quite realize it's a house yet. And he means to say that if the Byasein is anywhere, it's inside, or for lack of better words at the time, one of these massive structures, and he does mean the house, so that's just a little side note. Gutenoa continues. A few days ago, we lost contact with one of our most prosperous colonies in all of the New Land. Colony confidence literally vanished in terms of communication, and we don't want to send a search party for fear of what might be lurking in place of that colony. No doubt the disappearance of confidence is the work of the Byasein itself. This was one of the main reasons we have decided to launch an attack against the Byasein. If it can destroy a highway and one of our strongest colonies, there is no telling how much farther it will go to destroy us. The Byasein can send tentacles made up of parts of our own machines and buildings, and terribly even the corpses of our dead, and use these vile appendages to form titanic sub-monsters to fight us without the Byasein ever having to fight us itself. A good comparison can be made between the Byasein and an octopus. The main body of the octopus remains hidden, but its tentacles have dug deep into the earth and the soil of the New Land. So long and far-reaching, they can burst out anywhere and attack at any time. We need to stop letting the Byasein fight us from a distance. It is our mission to take the fight to the Byasein itself. If we cannot, we will be doomed to the fate it would have us accept. Total eradication. Gutenoa looks to General George, who nods at Gutenoa, giving the Prime Minister permission to continue. General George, our great defender and commander of our armed forces, is going to command an army we have amassed to use against the Byasein. However, to protect our civilians, we are leaving a specialized defense squad to protect not only Fort Mercy, should our mission fail, but also all of the citizens of our empire. Mercy is being outfitted with all of our latest technology to keep the people of the Minifig Newland Empire safe, while we do our duty. And carry out this duty we shall. Friends, now is not the time for fear. Now is the time to realize the scale of what we are about to embark on. The fate of both the Bionicle and Minifig race rests upon this single mission. That is too great a cause for us to fail. Our Minifig soldiers are brave indeed, and will deliver the might of the Minifig Newland Empire to the Byasein's cowardly hide. With King Archimod and his Bionicle subjects by our side, we have formed a fighting force that will take on and defeat our unearthly foe. The Byasein might not like us here, but it will pay for trying to destroy us in order to remove us from this land. We will move out in 2 days upon General George's command. Thank you all, and goodbye.
After his speech, Gyutnoa stepped off of the podium and moved with his commanding officers into their private section of Fort Mercy. The crowd was in shock at the fact that a full-scale attack was about to take place against the Byasein, and that they would be left behind in the protection of soldiers. But Gyutnoa did his best to disregard their worries. In his own head, Gyutnoa was experiencing some turmoil. Somehow he began blaming himself for his people's entire plight, as it was he who brought the Minifig race to the new land in the first place. He remembered the words of Captain Clark Briggs, who was highly opposed to letting the Bionicles join in an alliance with the Minifigs in the first place, saying, "They will be the end of all the Minifigs." Gyutnoa's hope was that he could establish an expansive empire in the New World to help the Minifig race grow and prosper once again after the anguish of the Old World had been escaped. His idealistic dream was to have his empire operate democratically, with a people's word voting system present in each colony. But as the crisis in the new land escalated, greater power was placed in the government as large decisions needed to be made quickly. Gyutnoa realized that his position as Prime Minister had changed. There was less democracy in the Minifig Newland Empire, and Stanley Gyutnoa had now become something of a dictator. He knew that it was up to him to see whether or not this was for the better. Dr. Daniel York began leading General George, Colonel Carlos, and Captains Mike, Clark, and Brian to one of Itka's secondary laboratories, where they were met with a hulking sight. Before them was a massive machine with 2 gigantic rear wheels, and a set of 2 powerful tractor treads at the front. But the size of the vehicle wasn't the only thing that took everyone by surprise. It was what the back end of the vehicle was outfitted with, a giant artillery cannon.
"What is this?"
General George asked Dr. York. York replied, "Gyutnoa asked Itka to begin work on military apparatus to assist the Minifig army. As Gyutnoa's plans to attack the Byasein were made clear, we knew we needed something to break into where military intelligence believes the Byasein lives. So we designed this, the Mobile Armored Mortar, MAM for short. The men, however, are just calling this Big Betty." The sheer speed with which the vehicle must have been built had George concerned. He looked at Dr. York and asked,
"How tested is it?"
Dr. York looked nervous, but pulled a confident face together and answered, "The cannon that Big Betty is outfitted with is a tried-and-true model of the Minifig army." George pressed on, asking,
"What about the vehicle itself?"
Dr. York looked off and said, "Well, the Prime Minister wanted this machine made within a few days, and he wants us to move out in 2. We'll continue doing diagnostic checks, but truly this machine is a bit of a rushed design." George nodded and said,
"Well, at least it looks the part."